It is every police leader's responsibility to not only continually develop their own skills and abilities, but to prepare the next generation of leaders. Retired Captain William Frost helps you meet this task by providing a clear blueprint to follow in his book, Leadership in Law Enforcement. To learn more about his book and other consulting and training he provides, go to www.code33consulting.com. That's code33consulting.com. Have you heard of Able? Able is built by AI engineers in San Francisco, and it takes body cam footage and turns it into police reports, using both visual data and transcripts to gather a full picture of the events. If your agency is still writing reports, then it's time to upgrade and liberate 1/3 of patrol time for more important things, like actual policing. Go to ablepolice.com, that's ABEL police.com to learn more.
And it's very easy to get caught up in doing the chiefing thing and trying to, push things from the executive level. And, you've learned a lot. You've become very competent in your craft, but you can be overconfident in how you're messaging that.
Competence definitely stems from having a learning mind frame, always being a student of your craft.
But if you can't budget, the men and women don't care. They need the stuff, right? And if you can't do good adult learning and your training sucks, the men and women don't care. You suck. And so I think that one of the biggest lessons I've learned is we have to be well-rounded.
Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tum. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, ladies and gents, welcome back to another panel episode of Blue Grit Radio. I'm stoked about this episode. We talk about leadership frequently, just about every episode, because leadership's literally part of how we run our lives and interact with everyone around us. But this is a bit more specific to organizational leadership, officialized leadership, right? So the rank, the boss, the manager, supervisor role. But as we all know on the show, that's not the point. That's like the job title, and leadership is the point. So I'm very excited to bring in this panel. LT Ray Polk returning to the show. We have Chief Dave Norris from Menlo Park. And we have the person with the best leadership title right now. That's retired former Commander Jeff Selleg, now doing all kinds of badassery with the NTOA. So appreciate you gentlemen for all being on.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All right. Why don't we start with LT Ray? Since you've gotten your feet wet before on the show, why don't you give us a brief introduction to those who have not heard you? You can look back in the episodes for more on Ray. But yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you currently do, your rank and role, and any other kind of supervisory roles as you come in and grown through law enforcement.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate the opportunity to be back on your show. You continue to put out wonderful content. It just gets better and better with every episode, man. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Currently serving as the Lieutenant Commander for Covert Operations. My previous experience in a leadership role includes promoting to sergeant and then being the mounted unit sergeant, the entertainment district sergeant, as well as the vice unit sergeant. Recently completed a PhD in leadership and community organization.
Thank you, LT Dr. Ray Polk. All right, we're going to go over to Chief Dave Norris. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Eric. Really appreciate you having me on the show. I have become a real fan of Blue Grit Radio. I think that the way that you're putting material out that hits all levels of the organization is really important. And, I listen to a lot of stuff on the leadership side. I listen to a lot of stuff outside of the policing profession. And this is the one that I keep going back to for, what can I send to the officers in our organization to give them a little bit of a taste of things that they can listen to that will give them a good point of reference. So I appreciate being part of this. I'm very honored to be a part of your team and what you're doing at Blue Grit Radio. So as for me, I am now 4 years in as the police chief in Menlo Park, California. For frame of reference to everybody, that's Silicon Valley, San Mateo County, the far south end of San Mateo County, but we sit right next to the Stanford University campus, which is kind of a good place to give you an idea where we are. We're a city of about 34,000. We have about 47 sworn officers and 70 total personnel. I've been here for 4 years. Prior to that, I spent 27 years with the city of San Mateo, which is a little bit larger city just north of us here. Served in a number of different capacities. I've done time working in a narcotics unit and criminal investigations, and serving as a detective, working everything from homicide to juvenile crime. My most formative time was as a field training officer, going back and being able to sit one-on-one in a car with officers and bring them what I've learned. And that idea of taking what I've learned and giving it back to the organization really caught me. It gave me the bug of leadership and put me on that path. And so as a supervisor, I had the majority of my time split between patrol operations, running a small team on graveyard shift, to about 4 years or so working as the public information officer. And that was right at the time, and I know we were talking about this a little bit earlier on, right at the time as when police departments were starting to get into the social media game. So I came in at a time that was a really transitional time for public information and public relations in policing. And then as I moved up the leadership ladder, supervised and managed the field, went back and supervised and managed the field training program. I had the opportunity to work the hiring and recruiting side of the business at the captain level, also overseeing investigations, the detectives and internal affairs, as well as public relations, and then also spent some time as a captain overseeing the entire patrol team during my time at San Mateo, serving a little bit of time as an interim and acting chief before jumping over to Menlo Park.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Chief. And I appreciate the very kind words. It really means a lot. That is the goal, is to hit everyone at all levels, right? Because we all need to develop this thing called leadership and ourselves in this journey. So I appreciate so much your time. And also, it's really cool to kind of learn, we have a professional colleague, I suppose, in common. Not my professional colleague, but my, I suppose, co-host or, guest on this show. But that's a retired Chief, Chris Shong. It's interesting to hear about your science background before the recording, and then also getting into PIO work, because that was, his being into like cybercrime, but also PIO work was a huge part of his career. So very, very cool. All right, Sir Jeff Selleg, the retiree, the king of all jobs, because he's not really retired, which is, I think, a key to being retired successfully.
You know what? I absolutely agree. And I've watched so many men and women of my generation really flounder in retirement because they think they're going to go sit on the front porch and just fish. And it doesn't work that way. We've got to stay busy. You got to keep the mind engaged. And so staying busy, having a plan. I had a pretty good plan leaving. And so I absolutely agree. Got to stay busy. So I started my career about 27 years. Well, I did 27 years. I was going to say years ago, but I've been retired 2 years now. I don't know how that happened. I held most of the roles that we talked about. I spent about half my time in patrol and half my time in some kind of special assignment. And so a couple of different, I did the FTO thing, and that's prepared me for being a good sergeant. A little bit of detective work, which prepared me to be a good sergeant, I think. And then back to patrol as a supervisor, a couple different patrol crews. Went and was the training unit supervisor, and with that came a bunch of collateral duties like hiring and managing the FTOs and a little bit of managing the accreditation folks and that kind of whatnot. And then promoted into what I would call management, promoted to the role of commander, and back to patrol. And I was a division commander both at the airport and at the seaport. And then I spent some time in purgatory as the admin services commander. And, you think you wrecked a car or something to get that job. But actually, I think one of the things that I think when we start talking about leadership and lessons learned is understanding that, trust comes from character and competency. And then you have to be not only have a person of high character to be trusted, you also have to be competent. And so getting exposure to those administrative roles, training roles, because really ultimately we come down, there's 3 types of leadership we bring to the table as commanders and sergeants. And it's operational leadership, training leadership, and administrative leadership. You kind of have to be good at all of them if you're going to be successful. I've spent 20 years on Valley SWAT, and the majority of that, about 15 of it in some form of leadership role. But if you can't budget, the men and women don't care. They need the stuff, right? And if you can't do good adult learning and your training sucks, the men and women don't care. you suck. And so I think that one of the biggest lessons I've learned is we have to be well-rounded, and it's competency, and character is the obvious one, but also competency comes with that, both in capabilities and results.
Yeah.
And I was never the PIO. One well-placed F-bomb, they never ask you back.
You say that, and I know you can put your polished hat on. Actually, I've known Jeff for years from being in the region when he was active, and as well as attending like leadership training, right? Like you delivered leadership training in the vein of crucial conversations, but it was the blend of, maybe just to roll off of what you just said, like it's the blend of competence and confidence that I oftentimes kind of toggle and present, which is that, yeah, you need to know your stuff, and that is a great way to improve your confidence, knowing that you know your stuff and like putting it out there. But at the same time, it wasn't just the curriculum, it was adapting it for the audience, which is what you're expert at. So thank you so much for your intro, but also diving right in. So let's just keep riffing off that, right? So we're talking about how do you develop that competence, right? So that you can build that confidence and build that trust. LT, you got anything on that?
I totally agree 100%. Competence definitely stems from having a learning mind frame, always being a student of your craft, always being willing to ask questions, not having any pride regarding feeling like you have to know everything just because you're the leader. I think when you embrace that mindset of always being willing to learn, you're 100% going to reinforce an attitude of confidence. You're getting those reps in leadership wise, and you're having that on the job training as well in order to step into those challenges and not being afraid of failure. I've bumped my head many times. One time has been today through my internet connection. I have to laugh about that, or else I would throw my phone out the window. No, I think that's a great point to raise. You definitely increase your level of confidence by being a student of this profession. If you look back historically, it has not always been a quote unquote profession. But as we continue to grow as an industry, we learn how to do things better, and the requirements continue to reinforce the fact that this is very much a profession, and we want to get better because the community deserves better. The community deserves our best. And so we definitely want to thrive in that area of leadership and competence.
Yeah, absolutely. So well said, Ray. And I love that, always wearing the student hat. I think if we all can have a goal to always be curious, always learning, like the moment you think you know it all, you're probably farthest from it. And that's
That's
like my
right.
personal reflections, like being a young quote unquote getting to be like a quote unquote senior cop, right? Whether I was a canine or whatever, I felt like I kind of knew it, right? Like I've seen it all, and you haven't. You never will. And that's kind of the point. So not to try to ever I just saw this today. It was like, don't go for the pot of gold, focus on the rainbow, right? And so, like, I just kind of never get that pot of gold. Even to point Jeff's point earlier, right? You're retired, but you're not done, right? That's far from it. So, Chief Norris, yeah, what does that stir
Yeah,
up in you, sir?
I love I love the way you're bringing this up, especially from a line perspective, of getting that kind of to that overconfident point, because that's a big part of learning, and especially as we're bringing up officers, as we're bringing up supervisors, especially in the business, they have to go through these iterations where you have to fail a little bit, and you have to understand that there's a balance between confidence and competence. I had a chief for a long time in San Mateo, and one of her things was confidence in your competence with compassion. And I think that the compassion part is important because what it does is gives us a little bit of perspective. And like Ray, I bumped my head a little bit this past week. I had a workshop with our supervisors and above, and one of the things that I came to realize was I wasn't spending enough time, and this was really good feedback that I got from our supervisors group, not spending enough time directly with our troops, with our line level. And it's very easy to get caught up in doing the chiefing thing and trying to push things from the executive level. And you've learned a lot, you've become very competent in your craft, but you can be overconfident in how you're messaging that if you're not tapping into that compassion and watching whether it's being received. by the line level the way that you intend it to be received. And so that was really good feedback for me, and that it gives me the opportunity to kind of like turn towards our team over the next couple of months and really dive in and spend some time with our personnel, whether that's riding along with them, catching them at briefings. I hate getting up early in the morning. Our first shift starts at 6 a.m. Like, man, it is hard for me to get up that early, but it's something that I've been telling myself I need to do. And then, this workshop came up, and it came back big and bad and feedback, like, you got to get back and do that. I want to talk really quick about something that I do to try and set that level of confidence and competence in our personnel. And so I was brought in right on the tail end of the pandemic. We as an organization came from being told to, like, just play center field, don't get yourself sick, don't get other people sick, don't go out and don't get into too much stuff intentionally, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And that chief left abruptly after providing that direction in the middle of 2020. And so when I inherited this department, it was a department that had only been given that direction and had not been given the direction to, like, go back to police work. And I found some old notes that I had put together in prep for previous promotional processes, and I had written it down in the back of one of my notebooks: prepared, polished, professional, proactive. And so I started to use what I call the 4 Ps, and I set that up. Like, if you're prepared, you're academically prepared, you understand the laws, the policies, your defensive tactics, everything that all of your training has put you in position to be good. You are polished, uniform looks good, your gear is sharp, everything's in order, you're professional. Everything you say or do, you could put in front of that on behalf of the city of Menlo Park, and you'd be good. If you can do those 3 things, you have my endorsement to do the 4th. So it's kind of just a packaged up confidence and competence package, right? But some of the cops, like the cops that I'm sure that Jeff was and Ray was, like, you know what you're doing, like, you kind of roll your eyes at that stuff. Like, what is the chief doing with this 4 Ps stuff? And so I had a conversation with a promotional candidate, and I said, I know you guys roll your eyes at this. And he just started to laugh. So I knew he was one of those guys, right? I said, so let's pull it back a little bit. Why don't you tell me about a traffic stop, and tell me about what you do that makes you successful on a traffic stop? And so he walked through all of those pieces about building rapport, about providing a good image of himself and the department, of trying to use that as leverage to gain voluntary compliance so they could get through the stop to a successful outcome. And I'm like, well, man, you just described the 4 Ps to me. I don't need you to know the 4 Ps. I need you to live the 4 Ps. But if you got some rookie officer who doesn't have any idea where to start, the 4 Ps gives them a roadmap. So, understanding natural confidence and competence, and new people who are trying to figure that out for themselves, and balancing those things and bringing it forward. That's how you increase competency in an organization.
Yeah, I love that, Chief. Definitely a fan of alliteration, right? You got competence, confidence with compassion, right? And you got the 4 Ps. That reminds me of a recent, semi-recent, like FTO panel where Officer Davin Huang, he talked about his 3 Ps as he teaches his rookies, right? And because
I remember listening to that.
yeah, so it's, like, I don't remember exactly where they overlap. I want to say they're either the 3 of the 4 or 2 are exactly the same. I would add, like positivity, patience, right? These are fantastic things, and I'm fine with people eye rolling, because I say a lot of things that might be cheesy, but if they're eye rolling, kind of nodding, like it's that it's helpful, right? We could liken these acronyms, or like little abbreviations or acronyms or alliteration, these little nuggets that are easy to remember, similar to a checklist, right? Like, sure, you can be really dialed in and know all the things, you've done it so many times, but one of my colleagues, we talk about this a lot, because officers hate checklists because they feel micromanaged, they feel like they're a cog and they have to do this thing, they feel like their intelligence is being insulted. But some of the most proficient, high stakes, extreme high stakes, with operators, pilots, scientists, like, when you can't afford to mess up, you have checklists and redundancies. And once it's part of the culture, it's just a system. Like, it's not personal. It's just what we do to ensure excellence, to ensure that we don't mess it up. And so I think that could be a cultural thing, kind of like you said, Chief. I don't need you to per se recite them. It might be nice if you are going for that promotion. That's your chief's thing. Like, know that stuff. But yeah, more importantly, know how to live it, know how to articulate it. I see you nodding there, Jeff.
Yes, you have hit it out of the park, and you've really are have wandered into the doctrine of the NTOA. So when it comes to what we have found, and the science is super clear, and I like Ray, I'm a closet researcher by trade, and I finished a doctorate of education at at Northeastern University, but I'm ABD. And I'm about 2 terms short of a second one, a doctorate in strategic leadership at Liberty University.
My
And so
gosh.
I'm a devout egghead researcher. And I say that if you're an egghead researcher, I'm not insulting you. We are kindred spirits. But the science is super
None
clear.
taken.
Okay, good, Ray. The science is super clear. The best decision makers have problem solving methodologies that they can go to in and under stress. And so we talked about the 3 types of leadership we provide, and you should have good problem solving methodologies for budget and staffing and administrative times and training and understand adult learning and Blue's taxonomy and Knoll's assumptions and all those things for training. But in the moment when you're standing in the rain and something is unfolding, you have to have some form of mental checklist to go with. And the difference is when our brothers and sisters in the big red truck show up, they come as a group. And one of them is a lieutenant who breaks out the checklist so they don't forget that. Well, our cops and deputies driving around don't have that option because they're in the car by themselves, but it is unfolding now. And so if they don't have some kind of acronym, some kind of illustration that they can go to, that they can use. And that's why we teach in our classes, we teach a whole bunch. We don't care which one you use, but have something, whether it's, the PACE or the ARC, or my favorite, and I have said this for years, and we use this when I was still working, is I used to teach pie, right? Only because everybody loves freaking pie. And so that's a checklist that you'll never forget because everybody likes pie. And it's the life safety priorities, the intelligence, and the environment. And then go through how those interplay and how a shift in one can dramatically shift the right courses of action. But if we use that, and so we've actually at the NTOA, we do a bunch of patrol classes also, and we bring all sorts of different acronyms and illustrations that we just want you to have something.
Yeah.
Because it has to be up here enough that it comes natural. So and that's really our doctrine. And when I say tactical, I don't mean like SWAT, hut, left. I mean tactical happening right now, right? So tactical happening right now. We use Pi 2, and so, but we've interwoven that into all of our classes. Like from the basic high risk warrant service at basic SWAT, we do it every day, all the way up to the Command 1 and Advanced Tactical Command. We've interwoven those things so there's a common language. But it's so critical because the big difference is you arrive in your green and gold car or your black and white car, you're generally by yourself, and you've got to have that checklist. There's a reason that pilots to do it, use it to this day. And there's some of the most competent, brilliant people in the world, but they still break out their checklist every time because the cost of failure is so high. And so we have to have some kind of mnemonic that the men and women can use, and it comes here and it comes natural. And then we've got to do, and this is the thing that I see, one of the gifts I've been given is I get to travel around the country on somebody else's dime and come do team evaluations. And they pay the NTOA to come out and evaluate their team. And we do it, stem to stern. And we run some training days. And what I see more and more and more is we in law enforcement do a great job on showing you how to use the tool. Here's the tool. Here's how you use it, whether it's a less lethal tool or breaching tool or whatever, but not when and how. So we don't teach the decision making behind it. And if I change a little bit of environment or a little bit of intelligence, they're like, I don't know what to do now. And so having that, being able to put it into the context that they're going to probably see it, and how little changes in context, whether the guy's barricaded in a car or in a house, is a big difference. It's certainly a big difference if it's a Walmart parking lot on Sunday, right? That's a big deal now. And so I think that having a methodology that creates a checklist in their mind that's not really a checklist, but it is, and being able to teach how to do decision making, because the best decision makers have problem solving techniques readily at hand.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So the NTOA, for those that are newer in, or they're prospective, so you don't have to look it up, like you don't have to fumble your phone as you're driving. National Tactical Officers Association. And Jeff, can you walk through? You mentioned PACE and ARC. Can you tell us what those are?
Yeah, so they're just, actually PACEs, before I was very fortunate that before got into law enforcement, I was a soldier, both enlisted and as an officer, all in the infantry branch. So ARC is for every action I do, what's the suspect's reaction going to be? And what's my counteraction to that? So it's just simple contingency planning. So action, reaction, counter. PACE is the one I used in the Army a lot. So here's my primary action. What's my alternative action? What are my contingencies? And what are my emergencies? So in Eric, when we used to work together, it was, what's the most likely course of action? You'd hear me stand on the command post. What's the most likely course of action? When we do A, what's his most likely course of action? What's the most dangerous course of action? That's the emergency part of it. So, and then I have a contingency built up for all of those, right? So what is the most likely course of action? We're going to put gas in the house. He's going to come out and get arrested. Okay, let's get our arrest teams in place, make sure all of our containment guys and gals have their APR so they don't get gassed out, and then we're ready for that. Most dangerous course of action, he starts shooting at us. Okay, make sure everybody's buttoned up, nobody's exposed, everybody's got ballistic protection before we even start, all those things. And then the one that we use the most at the NTOA is PI2. And so it's PI, P-I-E, and then T-O. And so P stands for life safety priorities. And what we use as a framework for that is the person in the highest level of jeopardy with the lowest opportunity to control that jeopardy becomes our focus of effort. So super easy in a hostage situation, right? They become the focus of effort. And everything that we do should be benefiting them. And so that's how the P of it. I stands for intelligence. Now, intelligence is different from information. Intelligence is valuable to me and verifiable. So not only is it valuable to me, but I can tell you who said it, who saw it, who did it, who whatever. Environment is exactly that: the terrain, the time, the weather, all those things. And frankly, if the suspect has an advantage in the environment, we change it. And so T is for tools, tactics, and technology. So intelligence and environment drive the correct tools, tactics, and technology. And then the last part, the O, is officer instincts, right? Don't forget. Now, officer instincts on their own, highly unreliable. But in the context of all of the rest of the pie part of it, does it make sense? Does it make sense? And you would hear me say it all the time in the command post. What am I missing? Why does this not make sense to me? And so by applying all of those, and really, the intelligence and the environment drive what the tactics, tools, and technology is, but you also have to have it, or at least the capability. And there's some teams that don't have all the capabilities. They're like, hey, or they don't have the tool. I really need a helicopter, but I don't have a helicopter. Okay, I have to use a drone. And then you adjust your courses of action based on what they are. The biggest thing is, and so we use Pi2. I think it's the most robust. It doesn't matter if you're going to a 2-car collision with no injuries. It doesn't matter if you're going to a train crash, a SWAT call, a canine deployment. All of that Pi applies to everything that we do. So it's just a super easy checklist for them.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Thanks for going through that. We could do a whole nother episode. We might need to do that, Jeff.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah,
but
I got an acronym. Yeah. I got to jump in on this, man.
Oh, please do.
So you guys are some leadership heavyweights, and I'm learning as I listen and we participate in this. I created a framework for the students that I teach at the North Central Texas Council of Government Regional Police Academy, and it's a variety of different departments, and they send their younger officers there to get trained. And so I was given the privilege of teaching leadership to this group. I taught them the leader model, and it landed fairly well, and I want to share this with your audience. So
yeah, please.
The leader acronym is it's leadership lessons that I learned from my father. And my father, he persevered through the civil rights movement. He served in the United States Navy. He's a pastor. He was a quality engineer for Lockheed. He wore a bunch of hats, but there were certain things that he did that I noticed that I take with me and put in my leadership tool bag to this day. So it's leader. Number one, he was loyal. He was loyal to the mission that was set before him, whether it was serving in the church, whether it was serving the people at Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics. He was loyal to the mission that was set before him. He never complained. He persevered through trials and tribulations, and he got things done, regardless of whether he had to come in early or to stay late. He was loyal to that mission. The E stands for educated. He's a graduate of Texas Christian University with a degree in finance, And during the time that he was in school, he was raising my two sisters, working full time, but he valued the importance of education. And when I speak of education, I'm not just talking about formal education. I'm talking about reading books. I love to read. I've learned that from him, and I want to become a voracious reader one day. And I got that from my dad. Number three is being assertive. This man is assertive when it comes to problem solving. He can see a crack in anything, and he will act so that the crack does not become a huge swelling problem. You know, there's so many examples that I can think of growing up where he saw different problems and recognized those, and he was immediately responding to them. So he was assertive, and also he was disciplined. I recall over and over and over again seeing my father wake up super early in the morning, oh dark 30, and he is on his knees in prayer and dedication and discipline, praying over our household. And so he was so disciplined when it comes to that. He was also empathetic. Or I should say he is also empathetic. My dad always traveled to hospitals to see people who were in need. He sacrificed his own time of leisure in order to make sure that everyone's needs were taken care of in our household, within the church, and at his job. He was so empathetic in how he spoke with people, even when he had to correct you, even when it was one of those uncomfortable conversations. He would never belittle you or talk down to you or make you feel like you were less than. If anything, he made you feel stronger after you had the conversation. So he was so empathetic, and he met people where they were emotionally. And last but certainly not least, he is responsible. He took ownership and accountability and responsibility for everything that he did in his life. And right now he's in a season where he's responsible for my mother, who is suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia. Every single day he cares for this woman, and he is so passionate and loving and considerate and selfless and how he is responsible for her. So, like I said, those are the lessons, the LEA leader model that I learned from my father, and it landed really well with the younger cops that were in the room. Even though he was not in law enforcement per se, there were still life lessons, valuable life lessons that I wanted to share with the group.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ray. I love that, and I love your father's example. Thank you for cutting in, because that's a perfect segue. I was taking some notes on what Jeff was sharing about, going off of what Chief Norris was sharing about. And this was a great way to kind of zoom out on something that a lot of people, they're either like really leaning into what Jeff was saying, they're like picturing all for their career, what they're doing in their actual tactics. And other people might be like, okay, I'm trying to adapt that for like where I'm at. Maybe you aren't in law enforcement, but I mean, you just said it, Ray, like leadership is leadership. And that's really the point here. So we can get into the technical minutia of things, but conceptually, like whether it's priorities of life or priorities, like what is the mission, right? Another acronym that we love in law enforcement, I've been nerding out on it, is WIN, right? What's important now? Yeah. Because, kind of one of the prompts, I don't even think I said it because we just like went off to the races, but one of the prompts, rather than just talking about leadership, was like adaptive new leadership. And I said it a little bit, I guess, at the beginning with like new role and rank, but we just have such a young industry. We have everyone changing hats. Like, I'm sure my department is just like most, where we got, when I was a commander on probation, I had 2 sergeants on probation, maybe 3 at one point. The other side patrol had similar. At the same time, we got probationary officers. We have 2 to 3 year FTOs. We got everybody, right? People are learning new things, and people are changing assignments, and people are retiring, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. So we do have a lot of really well-intentioned, strong character individuals that are stepping up, even if it's not according to the plan. But, even going off what Ray just said, right? Maybe we'll blend some things, right? So it's the professionalism that Chief mentioned. It's the responsibility taking that Ray talked about. And it's the priorities, right? Like, what is the agency priority? My priority might be different, but I want to intersect it. I want to meld them together. So I really appreciate you're walking us through that. And I was madly scribbling the acronym down here. So yeah, Chief Norris, I saw you taking notes and nodding along on the last 2 gentlemen. So I'd love to hear what's percolating in your brain right now.
One of the things that I have really been kind of hammering away at with our department, like many departments, when I came in, the majority of our department was, 4 and 5 year officers, and they're just learning who they are as cops, learning who their identity is, just on the verge of understanding what it is that they want to passionately do in their role as a police officer. And so I've been pushing this concept that I call leadership at every level, and it's really designed because every officer and really every employee, all the way down to all of our line level folks, need to understand that there's a level of leadership that they're entrusted with. With our agency, and I think our agency is similar to many others, we put you in a solo patrol car for 12 hours. You have very little direct supervision. Once in a while, the supervisor will roll by and check in on you. But for the most part, you're on your own to do that job. And we entrust you with decision making in some really crazy circumstances. That is leadership. And own the fact that you, in your solo patrol car, no matter what your level of experience is, you're a leader. And we trust you to be a leader, because otherwise we wouldn't have thrown you that keys at the end of the FTO period and said, okay, you're on your own, kid. So everyone needs to own that. There's a couple of sub concepts that I talk about with that. One of those, I call it stepping into the void. And that is, you see a need that has to be taken care of, and you step in to fill it, and you don't just stand back and wait for someone else to take it on. It's very easy to be passive in this business. It's very easy to take a step back and say, well, somebody else is going to take care of this. But it's you. And I tell a story, and I won't bore you with the whole long story, but I was failing in field training as a trainee, and until I had this light bulb moment, I was on the verge of not being a cop, because I didn't understand how to be proactive. And proactivity was a huge part of our culture. For me, growing up in San Mateo, it was a huge part of our culture here in Menlo Park. It took an FTO pulling me over as a trainee and just looking at me and going, look, this job is not a spectator sport. If you see something, you have a patch on your sleeve, you have a badge over your heart, it is your job to do something about it. You, individual police officer driving around solo patrol. And so if we see a need, we need to fill it. And the other part that to me is really important is what I call leadership, is elevating the game of everyone around you. So as you evolve as a leader, as you take on that individual leadership status as an officer in the organization, what for me as a supervisor or a manager or an executive in the organization, what's important to see in you is for you to understand that sharing what you've learned and sharing your experiences and turning to the person on your right and the person on your left and saying, hey, I learned something today and this is what it is. That's what leadership is about. And that is in itself leadership, right? You are doing things for people other than yourself, whether that's on the street with the public, whether that's with your fellow officers at the briefing table. If you are exhibiting a leadership characteristic in any of the things that we evaluate as supervisors, that puts you in that exceeds standards category for me as a supervisor evaluating an employee. What are you doing that impacts other people? And so that's the other really critical and important piece in leadership. So, stepping into that void and not being the one that steps back, you have to step forward and raise your hand and say, I'm in, and then sharing and elevating everybody that's around you. If you can do those things, you're exhibiting leadership at every level.
Yeah. Chief, there's so much that I'm going to zigzag around. There's so much that you said that resonates with me. It's so much about leaders building leaders. And I think that's David Marquet, Navy submarine commander, that talks about that concept. But that's where we're at, right? For a little bit, my sergeants there was a bit of angst with it where they're like, man, everyone's so new. You're new. I'm new. How do we do all this? And, after our contract vests, with our new medical, everyone's leaving, right? A third of the department, a little bit catastrophizing, but responsible for forward looking. Right? So I do appreciate those young leaders looking responsibly at that. However, it gets overwhelming, and we think about leadership as this, how do I right the ship? And a lot of what you said, Chief, is I'm going to do my part. I'm going to run my lap, right? That's leadership by example, and not just a fancy phrase that we paraphrase too much in oral boards, but it's no, I'm going to do my thing, and others around me, I'm going to try to improve those around me so we all get better day by day, right? So it's not just eating the elephant one bite at a time, but it's eating the elephant and then other people will join in because you're doing it. And then that thing's not going to be too terrible when a village is all coming together. And so I think with some things, just to go back, That is, I think, oftentimes on the things we're talking about. How do I build confidence? So many new, whether it's a new officer, as you talked about being a rookie, I had a similar, similar circumstance where I was looking at everything so literally, and we're talking about systems, we're talking about checklists that help us with the decision making, but so much is adaptive, and that's where the conversation of officer instinct, or you could call it intuition. Yes, as a brand new cop, that's not super great to rely on, but as a 5, 10, 15-year cop, now we're talking, because it's not just arbitrary intuition, it's practiced, it's experienced, it's studied, it's the educational base that Ray talks about. That is where, maybe that's where I'm going to ask us to take the conversation. Like, how do leaders consider that for their new role? Is like, yeah, you can study the books, but at a certain point, like, you got to do the thing and adapt it. Like, the checklist isn't going to save you. It's a guideline, right? And oftentimes it's the adaptability that we need. It's the flexibility that we need to be successful in this thing called policing that is uniquely challenging, in my estimation, to that than a lot of other industries that may conform to a checklist more commonly.
Yeah, Eric, I'm just going to say this really quick, and I want to let Ray get a chance to jump in too, and Jeff. But when you're talking about checklists, what checklists do is they allow you to build reps. And one thing that I love about being a former baseball player, baseball is one of those sports where the mechanics of repetition is critical. You can only be successful in the sport if you have done many repetitions and you understand how to mechanically do things as close to perfect as possible. And so in policing, it's very similar. Like, those checklists give you a guide, and they should give you confidence to go out and do the thing. And as you do the thing and follow the checklist over and over and over again, you start to build confidence in that capability. And that allows you, in situations that like Jeff is talking about, where you have milliseconds to make that decision, it allows you to thin slice through that checklist so fast because you've done it. And we are missing a chunk of repetitions right now in this industry because 2020 going on 2021 has eliminated a lot of those reps. And that's 2 years worth for cops that are 5 and 6 year cops right now. That's a lot. So, the more we can do to provide them with tools, the better off we will be. But we have to encourage all of our personnel to go out and do it.
Yeah, well said, Chief.
Well, I think that the other, or to really springboard off of Chief Norris's point, I think that we need to, that with that intuition that comes over time, you can take that checklist, which is a conceptual framework of how a system works, and know when things apply and when they don't.
Oftentimes, there's a lot of candidates that want to take the next step in the organization and promote. However, they find themselves at an impasse with where to start. A lot of times, those folks know exactly what it takes to be a leader because they do it at the line level. However, they are surpassed by those that simply test better, have the gift of the gab, whether or not they actually can put anything behind it. So if getting selected for the next rank is of interest to you, I highly recommend you do your homework and you recognize resources. The guide I've prepared, it hones in on a lot of my lessons learned from being on both sides of the table, breaking down the common test components, and also, arguably more importantly, how you identify, define, and prepare your own leadership philosophy that you can not only take into the test, but you can take into your day-to-day interactions with your team, your peers, your subordinates, and your leaders, right? Because leading up is a critical part of organizational development and culture as well. So for more on the guide, you can find it at bluegritwellness.com. That's the promotional guide at bluegritwellness.com/shop.
So that intuition will tell you, well, man, it says I gotta kick the tire 3 times, but in this case, I don't have to kick the tire at all because of X. And it gets back to one of the things that we can't forget. Much of the leadership research that's out there, Eric, is, like you said, it's built on a system that is business related or real estate related or whatever, and it's more of a linear system where we really work in a complex environment, right? There's multiple variables impacting the environment at one time, and if you change one variable, it may not impact the system right where you think it is. It may impact the system much later on and not where you think it's going to. Many of the variables we don't even know And so there's also multiple variables out there that we're unaware of until we make a change to the system and we get the results we didn't want.
Yep.
And then we have to go back. So because we work in a complex environment, we have to understand that with complexity comes iterative change. And as we make changes in that environment, we have to be ready for the changes we were looking that we didn't predict. But we don't teach that to our young cops. We teach them kind of linearly how things are going to go. And in your basic police work, a fundamental traffic stop is a fundamental traffic stop. Now it can go off the freaking rails at any point by either the violator or somebody in the environment or by the guy who wants to be on YouTube, all of those things. And so in that complex environment, and it circles us back to when we first started. I think in your opening, Eric, you talked about the necessity of curiosity. And then, Ray so eloquently talked about being a lifelong learner. And that all circles back to Chief Norris's point on leadership at all levels. We have to teach our cops, you are a community leader. We also owe them leadership training. Right. Training and education, because they're a little different, but leadership training and leadership education, because you are a community leader and we expect you to act like such. And if they go out into the world to do your will or the people's will, and they think, well, I'm a leader in this community and I've got to set a good example and I've got to act, in an altruistic manner and I've got to do all those things, they kind of get it. But they also got to be curious about what's going on. It goes back to Chief Norris's point about stepping into the void. If they're curious about what the hell's going on here, right? Versus, oh man, that and I would be lying if I didn't say driving my car home. Sometimes I didn't go, oop, nope, not today, nope.
Yeah, blinders on. He's doing the hand motion. Yeah.
But at the same time, we want to build that curiosity. And I think the other thing that I see, or a critical part that comes with that curiosity, is the willingness to just give it a run, just go out and try, because you're going to get a suboptimal outcome sometimes, right? It happens to all of us. But those failures, they're not tattoos, they're bruises, right? And so, I worked for a couple of really good chiefs, and one used to always say, we'd be in staff, how staff is, harumph. And then they're like, what happened? That guy, he did this and that. And it's like, well, when did that happen? That happened 5 years ago. And he paid his penance. He took his discipline, right? How long are we going to hold this over his head? Like a sword of Damocles. Let's maybe see if he's come around to our culture and our values. So having people, but it goes all the way back to both Ray and Chief Norris's point of, we can't just talk about it. We have to behave in that manner, set the example. One of my favorite quotes is, you can't talk your way out of a problem you behaved your way into. You can only behave your way out of it. And so it comes back to, if we want our cops to be curious, we have to be curious. If we want our cops to be lifelong learners, we got to be lifelong learners and set our ego aside at the door and say, and I used to get great mileage out of going down to the roll call room, finding two young cops sitting there and saying, hey, explain this to me. How come I can't use my CAD? How come my CAD don't ever work? And I'd throw my laptop down and say, hey, get me logged in here. And they would walk me through that and be like, God, dadgum commander can't even log into CAD. Well, man, we used to handwrite reports when I was a new cop, for shit's sake. So I think that was a very long way around to really bounce off of the great points of Ray and Chief Norris. But I think that curiosity is a big deal, and that, man, failure is not a tattoo. It's just a bruise. But as long as you learn from it, right? And if they can come at it with a level of curiosity of, well, that's true, that didn't end up how I thought it would. But man, I learned these things. And it adds back to our intuition, because we don't have those. Man, when I started, if you didn't have 15 years on, you couldn't have 3 stripes on your shoulder. And now 2 and 3 year cops are getting promoted to supervisor everywhere in the country. And it's just,
I think before you had 5 years on, I'm not sure you're able to speak in all circles or rooms or formats. So it's a thing, right? Like, you got to earn your keep. And we will get to you, Ray, in one sec. But just to kind of spin off of what Jeff just said, so much of that for me is like mindset, right? Like, Chief Norris talks about stepping into the void. And literally when he said that earlier this episode, if you can remember, listeners, when you heard that, did you think the void is a dark, scary place and full of dangers and threats? Or did you think the void was like full of potential wonders and things you're curious about? Maybe it's not all opportunities, maybe it's not all shiny treasures, but it's lessons regardless, right? And so that powered mindset's so critical to everything we're talking about. So I just kind of wanted to circle on that real quick. But Ray, please What's spinning up in your brain right now as we kind of have gone around the room a couple times?
Soaking it all in. This is absolutely fantastic. It's making me think about the concept of the cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of that void. Just like you said, you're so close to getting into that next level of your leadership, the next level of impact in the community, the next level of growth. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable and make the mistake. And I think that as tenured leaders, we have to understand that we have to understand where they're coming from. We have to understand how they learn. Everybody doesn't read books. Some people through experiences. Other people learn by listening to podcasts like these.
Yes.
I think we have to really meet people. Yes, we have to meet people where they are. And so when it comes to impacting the younger generation of cops, I want to talk about how not to behave. So I'm reading a book right now called Begin with We, and it's by Kyle McDonald. And in chapter 2, he talks about the executive seagull. Now, I find this concept very interesting, and the imagery points to people outside of an ocean having lunch, and then here comes the seagull grabbing the sandwich and taking a crap on everything and swooping out as quickly as they swooped in. So I cringe because I hope and I pray that I have never done that to my people, and I would ask and beg for forgiveness if I have. As leaders, it's very important for us not to be that executive seagull and try to assert our infinite wisdom and knowledge into situations that are working just because, like we talked earlier, you have to feel like you're the smartest person in the room. I learn from my young guys and gals every single day. They teach me all kind of stuff. I like the example that you gave about, hey, show me how to get my computer to work. I mean, that's beautiful. It's very engaging, and it's a very smart tactic to create that ongoing dialogue that we need as leaders. And so I feel like it's very important for us to allow this younger generation to have a voice in the conversation of leadership. I firmly believe that without weigh-in, there is no buy-in. You will be surprised at the wisdom and information that these young people have, especially about technology. But I think that it's very important for us to take away from this part of the conversation that we should always have that open communication. We should be the leader that we want to see from our people. We have to exemplify and model that behavior. It's not one of these my way or the highway, do as I say and not as I do. Those days are over because guess what? They are watching. Whether you realize it or not, they are always watching us for the good and for the bad. So we have to constantly realize that it's important for us to understand our role of being above reproach. Not to say that we're supposed to be perfect or anything like that. They should see us make mistakes. They should see us learning and growing and asking questions and being inquisitive because that's what we want to see from them. And so I value this great conversation as we talk about moving forward with leadership and with learning and making the profession better.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said you put it there to combine a few things, right? That executive seagull. How you get around that is things like Jeff said, hey, officer, Frank, whatever, right? Like, can you help me with this MDC? It's been like 5 years. I don't even know if I remember my password. Like, help me, right? It's that humility. And like, you can inject some humor into it. Like, hey, they didn't teach us how to use these damn things, right? And then as Chief said, hey, like the feedback was critical that troops want to see you more, right? They want more interaction. So you're like, Roger that, right? So I don't seem like the seagull that we know there's different types. We know there's the seagull that that I'm not going to say there aren't leaders that want to throw their power and their stars or bars around. But also there are those well-intended. They're just swept up in other things, and then they show up. They want to provide value. They want to have some connection, but it's too infrequent. So you don't have that degree of trust where it is known or felt of like, yeah, the boss is trying to look out for me. He doesn't want me to repeat his mistake. I appreciate that. They don't have that because they don't have the context, right? So that's a reminder, just like as Chief Norris said, yeah, we got to show up. Like sometimes that's literally physically. Jeff and Chief, I'm curious if you have anything before I want to try this kind of a rapid fire thing where we go around the room for the people at different stages of their career and what little things you would have them think about. And that might be phrases or like a sentence or two. And that's like the rules of the rapid fire. But before I do, Chief, do you have anything?
Yeah, one quick thing on that. You make some great points about. I think the discussion here has been really good about what we're learning and how we're learning it and how we present it. And we do need to, be a little bit vulnerable, be a little bit, eye to eye, line level. One of the things that I remember that as you were talking about this was Basic Police Academy, and there was an instructor, and I won't name him because he's still got a book out there, but it was about making traffic stops, and there was going to be the traffic stop scenario was going to be based on this guy's book. Okay. And his catchphrase was, read my book and you'll pass. And I never forgot that because I felt like it was so incredibly impersonal, and it attached a phrase that I've used now in the past many times, which is you cannot write a memo and change the world. You've got to be able to have real conversations with real people. And so I talk about two concepts that I think are super important in organizational leadership, and that's North Stars and champions. What kind of North Stars, very broad stroke priorities are you setting so that everyone can set their eyes on it? It's small enough and easy enough to think about and remember that you can keep your priority by thinking about it. And then the champions part is it cannot be me at the position of chief with the stars on the collar coming in and telling people this is what you need to do. It has to be the person on your right and the person on your left at the briefing table saying like, hey, this makes sense and I believe in it. And if that's not happening, then it's not going to work. And so, that's why this feedback last week was so important to me, is it brings me back to that, like, I need to be looking people eye to eye and saying like, hey, these are things that I believe in. And like, I challenge you to test it, find it true, and relay it if you think it's true. But if you think it's a bunch of BS, then come back and tell me it's a bunch of BS, because I need that feedback.
Yeah, it's the difference between power and influence, right?
Yeah.
Like people doing things because they have to, because you said so, or because they believe in it, they see it, they want to be a part of it. How about you, Jeff?
What? Yeah, nothing really to add. I'm excited for the ad lib part of this, but I think that so much of it is, people, they don't care about your intent, and nobody understands your intent anyway. They see you and they mark you based on your behavior. And so am I behaving in a manner that is trust building, or am I behaving in a manner that's a trust tax? And am I behaving in a manner that's congruent with our values? Because that's really, the definition of integrity is not only honesty is a big part of it, but also, if I say I value these things, am I behaving congruent with that? And that's going to build trust long term and make it more sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, let's do this rapid fire thing. So we'll start with Chief. We're going to go clockwise on my screen. So we're going to go Chief, Jeff, Ray, the Lieutenant Doctor. Shoot, Jeff, you're a doctor too. You're almost a double doctor. So we need a better nickname. Yeah. So in any case, all right. So what is the advice you have? And this could be phrase, max 2 sentences for new officers, right? So that could be coming in, or that could be kind of finding their footing in the conversation of leadership and confidence. So Chief, what do you got?
Be curious, ask questions, use the entire family as your resource. All those officers are there to support you, and you can't learn without learning from everybody.
That's good. Jeff, what do you got?
Check it out before you act out.
Nice. Ray?
Try to look at things from the perspective of your supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
If you have goals of becoming a better supervisor, then try to look at things from their chair and not just yours.
Yeah, it's easy to be angry. It's hard to empathize, right? Going back to that E. So that will help you, regardless of whether you're promoted or not. That'll help you build that culture. Love it. All right. How about the first line, the new first line? So Sergeant Corporal. Chief?
I agree with Ray on this. Like, understand the level above and the expectations and the level of expectations that you set for your personnel.
Excellent. Jeff?
Take care of your people. They'll take care of you.
All right. Ray, on to you.
You're no longer just one of the guys. The sergeant level is one of the most important levels in the entire organization. You have to hold the line and be balanced between having the rapport and then preaching that company message.
All right. Right. You squeezed some in there. All right. Now we're going to go to command staff. No, you're okay. You're okay. It's all good stuff. Command staff. So now you're the management. Chief?
Definitely expand your perspective. You've got to include professional staff in your thought processes. It's very easy to get locked in on sworn. Try to be expansive about that and be inclusive of the rest of the staff.
Love it. Jeff.
You have to be present and available all the time.
And that's the truth. And I think that's one of the biggest things. He's never around. She's never around. And I know some of those folks that have received those. I'm not putting myself under the microscope because I don't want to sound biased, but I have seen peers. They're really trying to show up. They're just sucked into a lot of things. So you got to make that intentional. Hey,
Never forget where you came from, and your rank has more to do with responsibility than privilege.
Powerful. I love it. All right, this one's just for Chief. So, Chief, what advice do you have for the up and coming Chiefs?
Wow. I would go back to this, be very global in your thought. If you are the chief, you have to think about everybody in your organization, not just your sworn staff, everyone. And you're also 1 foot in and 1 foot on the outside, right? You're the one position in the department where your responsibility is not just all of the people in your charge, and that's a huge responsibility, but you also have the responsibility of the connection with your community, with your electeds, with the rest of the city or county organization. So you really have to find that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. You're cheating, Chief, but I'll allow it because you're Chief. And that was a special question for you. So my last question, and we'll also sign off, and people can let people know how they can reach out and get in contact. But we'll start with Jeff. But my last question is, with all this pressure, stress, like we've learned a lot, we've talked about a lot. It is not it is not easy, the burden of leadership and responsibility. So what have you done in your career, or what are you doing now that best helps you counterbalance that stress for the purpose of wellness?
Well, I think that my generation did a really poor job of understanding wellness and resiliency and taking care of it. Now that we know the science is super clear, this job is killing us and taking years off of our lives. We've got to do a better job staying physically fit and staying mentally fit. I didn't understand until recently the whole difference between the brain and the mind. The brain's the organ, the mind is your seat of consciousness, and you actually have to maintain both. And no one would argue the necessity of physical fitness. That's easy to understand, but nobody talks brain fitness. And so that's a huge push now at the NTOA. And so like hardiness and resiliency training, emotional intelligence training for the mind, and then cognitive development exercises for the brain as an organ to make the brain healthier, more white matter, better myelination in between synapses and things like that, so that we can enjoy our retirement. Because if you look across the country, especially men and women who retire and then stop doing stuff, they make it maybe 3 or 4 years and then they're gone. And so we got to do a better job of that. And so treating your body as a holistic system and exercising the whole system, I think, is the most important part looking back.
Yeah, I love that. That's powerful, right? That differentiation between the brain and the mind. And we'll have to put a cap on that because we could go for another hour just nerding out or just bouncing some ideas on that. But for me, I think this could resonate with a lot of the people that listen in, but it is recognizing that you probably not only don't have to, but you shouldn't be doing something all the time. Like we have our job, we have our families, we're learning, we're listening to podcasts. Yes, listen to this podcast and others, but there needs to be some time where you actually like kind of just take a moment, nature, right? Like just do your physical activity, just decompress, like be present. And that's what comes to me when you talk about the difference between mind and brain. Like how do you support the mind? And that is not always having all this chatter going on, at least someone like me, for sure.
Oh, that's absolutely right.
All right, Ray, what do you got for wellness, decompression?
Well, during the last episode that I was on, I talked about riding my horse. So, you got to have that time away. I call it getting on the balcony. Some people call it margin. Some people call it a sabbatical. You have to get on the balcony and get off of the dance floor and hit that switch to turn your mind off. Do some type of mindless, pleasurable activity. For me, it's getting up on my horse, riding the trail, dealing with some points of reflection throughout my work week, but not allowing that to consume my thoughts. This is time for me to decompress and to realize that I have had some wins, and be thankful and be grateful for the experiences that I've had throughout the week. It's a time of reflection that involves being thankful for everything that has happened, the good and the bad, because you can learn from both. So get on the balcony, have that time away, do what you need to do to support your mental health, your physical health, not just those activities that are numbing, but those things that are truly beneficial to your overall health and well-being.
Yeah, I love it, Ray. And that allegory of the balcony of the dance floor, I'm pretty certain retired Chief Chris Shung used that as far as leadership, seeing bigger picture, right? Get off the dance floor where you only see 1 foot around you. You have to see bigger. And so I love the rapid fire. I suspected this would happen. For those that just heard it, think about this, or maybe even listen back. But everything that these gentlemen shared in this rapid fire for different levels, it actually applies to you today, regardless. All of those things, even though we tried to identify it for a specific role or rank, it's all highly applicable to just you being a better person, teammate, service individual, family member, parent, what have you. So thank you all so much for your time, your wisdom, your insight, and in some degree of vulnerability. Absolutely. So we're just going to go around real quick and let folks know where they can find you. So, Chief?
Easiest place for me is via LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive on the messaging app, unless you're a vendor. And I'll just be honest, if you're a vendor, I might lag in responding. But if you're just reaching out and you're looking to connect, I'm pretty good with that on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me.
Awesome. Any closing notes from you, Chief?
Just really quick, I know you were asking about decompression, and I will say 2 things really quick. One, it's important to offer a broad menu of options for your personnel. Everybody's different, and everybody will find that one thing that works for them. For me personally, I still play baseball on the weekends, and getting my cleats in the dirt on a Sunday morning for my wood bat old man's league, that's what does it for me. It scrubs the entire stress of the week away from me.
Love it. Thank you for your time, Chief. Jeff?
So I guess the best way to get a hold of me is through probably email, the most responsive way. And so it's jselleg at NTOA. So John, Sam, Echo, Lincoln, Echo George at ntoa.org. I also am on LinkedIn, but I don't look at it very often. And Eric, I apologize. I'm not super responsive on my LinkedIn.
No, you're a busy man.
And I get around to it when I get around to it. But if anybody needs to get a hold of me, I'm a forever resource, and you're never bothering me. And being old and retired now, I love talking to cops that are out there still doing the work and still doing good things. And I just close with, please be well and please be safe.
Yeah, thank you, sir. All right, Ray, close us off.
Well, I'm so grateful to be on the podcast today. I really value our conversation. What I want to leave with your audience is that regardless of your rank, regardless of your background, you have the opportunity to lead in your current capacity, in your current role. The community is counting on you. Don't be one of these people who are disengaged in the workforce. If you find yourself in that, always remember when you got the phone call saying, hey, you now have the privilege and the opportunity to be a police officer. Let that call drive you and carry you throughout your career. The best way to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn under Command Leadership Mastery Services, where I do leadership coaching. It's Ray L. Polk Jr. I'm just here to help. I want to help as many people as I can to make the next generation of our profession even better.
Well, stellar work, gentlemen. Sometimes we get an interview together and panel, and I feel like it was legitimate work. We put our brains together, and I so appreciate the collaboration. I get this unique joy of getting to listen to this back a couple times before it airs, and I make the habit of re-listening to it once it's all done. And then so many takeaways, just like watching a really good movie. The next time you revisit it, especially if it's a different time in your life or career. Thank you all so much for joining in this and sharing this conversation with everyone else.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.